Games as a service. It's a phrase that has been creeping into the gaming scene for the past couple months and is really starting to get some steam with the bigger companies. So today I thought we would just talk about what are games as a service, why they work for some games like Rainbow Six Siege, and they don't work for others like Star Wars Battlefront 2. And then at the end I'll just give my thoughts for games as a service and just where I think they're going to be going from here. Welcome back. As I said, today we're going to talk about games as a service. So let's start with what is games as a service. So games as a service is the new phrase that gaming companies have coined that they want their games to go to. They're looking for a way to monetize the game after the launch so that way the game is relevant for longer and also continues to make them a boatload of money. The goal for these companies is to make less games, so not a game every single year like your current Call of Duties or Maddens, but for a game to last 2, 3, or more years, allowing the company to make more money off of something that they've already produced, as opposed to putting more resources into producing something new. So this is great for companies if they do it right. And if we look at Rainbow Six Siege for Ubisoft, that's games as a service done right. It'll make them more money, less games need to be produced, and it keeps your player base pretty happy. So it can be amazing for companies. Now, it can also be bad for companies if they go the route Battlefront 2 did, where the games as a service model was too reliant on microtransactions at the start. While Rainbow Six Siege does have microtransactions and does have a lot of microtransactions, and you are able to purchase operators or their heroes for real money, the basis of their service platform and their way they make revenue wasn't solely reliant on that. This idea of games as a service can also be great for gamers. So games that you really love, like again, Rainbow Six Siege, I'm a huge fan of that game, will be around longer than the average game, which is 1 to 2 years. The goal for Rainbow Six right now, they had said, was 100 operators, and that is a ton from where they started out. It also allows for the DLC to be free for everyone who plays that game, which is basically free expansions. We get new maps, we get new weapons, we get new heroes or characters to play as. It'll keep fans engaged and keep you coming back, with the games also lasting longer. When you pay your microtransaction fees to get that cosmetic that you like, you're not only using it for that 1 year until the next game comes out, you're using it past that, which makes it easier for people to justify purchasing something with real money. Now on the flip side, it can also be very bad for players and bad for gamers with the microtransaction abuses and also with services just being dropped flat out without warning because goals aren't being met. So games as a service will not work for everyone, and it will not work for every single game out there, even though that's the way the industry is wanting to go. With the way games are produced right now, it just won't work for everything. So let's take a look at Rainbow Six Siege and why games as a service really worked for that game. So Rainbow Six Siege is a tactical first-person shooter where you work as a team of 5 and you go against another team of 5. You play either attack or defense, and then you rotate between rounds. Now in Rainbow Six Siege, there are 3 game modes that you can play. You have Hostage, Search and Destroy, or Bomb, and then you have Secure the Area. With those 3 game modes in mind, you do not have a choice when you launch which one you're going to play. This causes players to be funneled into 2 categories to really play online. You can either play it casual, which is a little less stressful. With less rounds, it's best of 5 as opposed to ranked, which is best of 7, and the rounds are 4 minutes as opposed to 3 minutes. Or you can go ranked, where it's best of 7 and the rounds are 4 minutes. So with that, whenever they release DLC, you're constantly using the DLC that's released, either the new operators or the new map, because you only have those 2 options. The game will sort out whether or not you're going to play one of those 3 objectives. You don't have a choice unless you turn them off in your search preferences. This allows Ubisoft to develop DLC for basically 1 game mode. They just need to make sure that they're producing operators and a map for every season, and they don't have to worry about different game types or different playlists that players may go into and not see the newest DLC. The game also doesn't really have any single player missions. It does have a terrorist hunt mode where you can go play by yourself or with others. However, there's no real storyline or campaign. This also allows them to focus mainly on the multiplayer environment. While the game is smaller and doesn't have all the bells and whistles that we would normally expect with games where it would have a single player campaign and then a multiplayer experience to go along with that, they know what they are, and they took Rainbow Rainbow Six down a different path and made it solely a multiplayer game, again allowing them only to focus with the DLC on the multiplayer experience. Rainbow Six also has a season pass. Now the season pass does not divide the player base. It's basically giving you access to the operators that come out that season early, 1 week early from everybody else, and also instant access to them so you don't have to spend your in-game currency on it. Other than that, it will also give you a discount on the store. However, if you're buying the season pass, really you're only doing it for that early access and for that immediate access to the operators. There's no benefit to the season pass that another player doesn't have if they're willing to put in the time to grind out the operators. If you're not wanting to pay for your season pass to get your operators instantly and not have to grind it out, if you don't want to grind out for an operator, you can purchase them with real money as well. Last I checked, they were $5.99, and there's also lots of cosmetics out there for you to purchase in Rainbow Six Siege for a couple bucks. So with those revenue streams, Ubisoft is making enough money in order to continue to release content for Rainbow Six, allowing it to be a very successful games as a service model game. Rainbow Six has been out for going on 3 years now. We just started year 3, and it has grown in players ever since its initial release. Part of that is due to Rainbow Six releasing DLC every 4 months or so, and every single time it's 2 operators and 1 new map, so you know what you're getting. So in summary, why Rainbow Six Siege works as a game as a service, the DLC only has to focus on really one playlist or game mode. It releases content regularly and consistently, giving 2 operators and 1 map, which keeps the meta constantly changing from season to season, and it has the revenue stream in order to keep Ubisoft interested in keeping the game alive and supported. Now, if we take a look at the game as a service model for a game that doesn't work, we turn to Battlefront 2. Now, while I love Battlefront 2, I have a lot of fun playing it. I actually enjoy both of these games for different reasons. Rainbow Six is very competitive, and that's a lot of fun. Battlefront 2 is just a lot more relaxing, and I don't really care how I perform in that game, but it's fun to live in the Star Wars experience. But for Battlefront 2, there are just way too many game modes to focus as a game as a service model. You have Galactic Assault, you have Blast, which is your team deathmatch, you have Strike, which is a smaller objective-based mode. Then you have your Starfighter, you have Heroes vs. Villains Starfighter, you have Heroes vs. Villains Normal, and then you have the game modes that they release like Ewok Hunt and Jetpack Cargo and Extraction. There's just too many game modes out there for them to do game as a service model successfully. If they focus on releasing content for one game mode in particular, that means that another game mode's not going to get that content, which then upsets that portion of the player base. Like when they release Starfighter Heroes, the Galactic Assault players, the Blast players, and Strike players don't care because you can't use Starfighter Heroes in those game modes. Just like when they release new heroes to use in Galactic Assault or Heroes vs. Villains, your Starfighter players don't care because they don't get to use them. Your Strike and Blast players don't care because they don't have those heroes in those game modes. It's only infantry. So there's too many game modes. There's too many avenues of approach that Battlefront 2 is trying to go down. Instead of the Rainbow Six model of having one game mode or one playlist for players to funnel into, you have 6 to 9, depending on what they give you access to, of players funneling in and out of. And to be able to fund DLC for all of those game modes at the same time is just not possible with the amount of money that Battlefront 2 is going to be bringing in right now. And keeping on game modes, they're trying to release even more game modes. So right now, Battlefront 2 is working on releasing a Conquest style game mode. While I think that's going to be a ton of fun, and I love Conquest in the Battlefield series, I feel that adding another game mode in is taking too much time away from just simply developing maps, heroes, weapons, and other things that would keep your current game modes fresh and active. While the new game modes can keep the player base energized by playing something different, a lot of times they're something that you can play 1 or 2 rounds of, and then you want to go back to the game mode that you've been playing. Ewok Hunt, for example, is a ton of fun. However, we always end up back at Galactic Assault because that is the most fun game mode, at least in my opinion. And then when we look at the revenue stream that supports the design for all these game modes. Initially, Battlefront 2 was a little too greedy with the loot box and microtransaction system, and having loot boxes really play into the game itself. Now, if that would have continued without a backlash, there is a chance that they would have had enough revenue to support DLC for all the different types of game modes and to keep EA and DICE engaged in making sure that content was released and released consistently if they were bringing in that revenue. However, there's a huge backlash on loot boxes. And I don't blame people. Loot boxes to me are a waste of money. And I don't pay for anything that I don't know that I'm getting in video games. If I'm going to pay a microtransaction fee, I want to make sure I'm getting what I paid for. But Battlefront 2 was a bit too greedy on that up front. Now, if they would have waited, like Call of Duty tends to do, and put in loot boxes for a fee that could help you catch up, a couple months into the game, I think probably would have let that slide, or a lot of people would have let that slide, since it would primarily be a catch-up mechanic at that point. But once that backlash hit and loot boxes were removed, there wasn't any revenue generation coming from Battlefront 2, which then kills the motivation for EA or DICE to continue to focus on producing for the game, and that's why we've had a drought in new maps, especially for Galactic Assault. So when we compare the two games, we have Rainbow Six Siege, who has the 1 game mode, versus Battlefront that has like the 9. Then you have Rainbow Six Siege also having microtransactions and a season pass bringing in the revenue. For the longest time, Battlefront 2 had no way of making any money on the game. They'd removed all loot boxes and all microtransactions from the game for, I believe it was the first 6 months. So there's no revenue stream there to keep the game active. And then finally, we have the consistency. Every 4 months or so, you can expect 2 new operators and a new map for Rainbow Six Siege. For Star Wars Battlefront 2, on the other hand, we don't know when we're going to be getting the new heroes. We know the general timeframes, but we don't know for sure or what month they'll be coming out. So what we've learned from all of this is that in order for games as a service to work, and for games as a service to be the model for gaming companies to go to, they need to make sure that they're releasing content regularly and on a schedule. They need to make sure the game modes are limited, so that way the DLC can be focused in towards the player base, since the player base is all in the same 1 to 2 game mode playlists, and they need to make sure that there's a strong enough revenue stream coming in from that game in order to have it continue. So where I think this is going to be going from here, I have a feeling that within the next couple of years, we're going to start seeing games dropping down to 1 to 2 game modes per game. We're not going to see these large behemoth of games that we have been seeing in the past that have a team deathmatch, a domination, a capture the flag, a large scale conquest style game mode, aerial game mode. We're not going to be seeing games that have all of those game modes in one package, at least if they're trying to go the games as a service model. We'll also start seeing a lot more microtransactions. While I'm not a huge fan of microtransactions, I have a feeling that every cosmetic item and every cosmetic detail will eventually come down to costing the player 1 to 2 real life dollars. Right now, you have some cosmetic items locked behind a paywall. I have a feeling that within the next couple of years, we're going to see all of those locked behind a paywall. And then for anyone working at a gaming studio, here's my suggestion for you. Take the Rainbow Six style approach and have a season pass. The season pass would only cover access to new characters and weapons, and maps would be free to all players. That way, it keeps the community together, and you're not dividing the community base based off of who's downloaded the DLC. You're just restricting the different new characters behind the season pass or DLC paywall. But there you have it. We have games as a service, and why some games work and why some games fail. In summary, you need to have the consistency of the DLC coming out on a schedule so that players know when it's coming. You need to have the revenue to support the game, either through cosmetics or a light season pass. And finally, you need to have a more restricted game mode and not a behemoth of a game that has, 9 different game modes. While I like having the different options within a game to play, realistically, if a game is going to last a long period of time and the DLC is going to be free and consistent, a lot of different styles and a lot of different game modes are not going to be productive in the long run. So in the comments, tell me what you think of games as a service. Do you want to see more games go to games as a service model? Do you want to see them stick with the season pass model? Or would you like to see them go back to an even older model where you're basically paying full price for the game, full price for the DLC, or for the expansions, and have expansions come out, once or twice a year. Personally, I love games as a service. I like the idea of somebody else paying for my DLC and me having free access to it. So I'm a fan of games as a service. Now with that may change. Like everything, your opinion is allowed to adjust as time progresses and as things play out. But that's where I am now. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give that like button a click and then subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you have an amazing day. I'll see you in game.